If you're hot at night, you stick your foot out from under the blanket to dump heat. If you walk up to a fire and you're cold, you immediately stick your palms out to kind of warm yourself. You hold your warm mug of coffee in the morning. So it's a system that we use and a lot of animals use all the time to either dump heat or accept heat.
Welcome to the Invigor Medical Podcast, where we sit down with medical professionals and discuss a full spectrum of health-related subjects. It all starts in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the Invigor Medical Podcast. I'm Natalie Garland. This morning I'm joined by my lovely co-host Derek. Derek, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's a beautiful morning in Southeast Washington. I had a fantastic weekend at a cabin with friends, and so I'm feeling like ready to take
Super
on the
pumped.
week. Yeah? That's always a good feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this morning, we're very excited to be joined by Kyle Sela. Kyle is an accomplished fellowship-trained sports performance physical therapist with extensive experience in working with athletes across the spectrum of care. His expertise is in therapy, personal training, and sports performance coaching. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
We're so excited to have you on. I remember when Derek and I were sitting one day having a conversation about the kinds of episodes we wanted to host and the kinds of people we wanted to talk to. And he mentioned he'd come across you and some of the things you've been working on. And we were just like, wow, this guy sounds so cool. And we're really excited to hear about what you're doing and this cool thing that you've created. But let's just start a little bit with how you got where you are today. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I grew up in Seward, Alaska, ended up going to undergraduate school at Eastern Oregon University, so not too far from where you guys are. I got a business degree, but kind of always regretted not going after physical therapy. So after that, I moved back to Seattle and took all the science prerequisites before applying to grad school, and then was fortunate enough to get a spot in the U.S. Army Baylor physical therapy program. And so I went to my DPT program wearing a uniform as an Army officer. And so I spent 7 years as an active duty Army physical therapist. And when I got out of the Army, I knew it wasn't going to be a career thing for me, but I thought I wanted to go into professional or college level sports as a physical therapist. And so I was seeking some additional training and ended up doing a sports fellowship at Duke University. So I got to work with their sports program for a year, which was incredible for me. I grew up a Duke basketball fan, so getting to go to practice.
Fun.
Yeah. So getting to go to practice and run across the court with the team was just like
a dream come true.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And trying to play it cool, like I belong there, but I was definitely, on cloud nine that whole year, and just honestly learning from just some incredible physicians and physical therapists.
I can imagine
because
they have a great sports program.
Oh yeah. And and the Army is awesome, but just another level, when you get to that high level of collegiate athletes and really I was like, okay, this is where I want to be. And so I did my year training there, and we were just starting to have kids, my wife and I, and we were like, maybe let's move closer to family for right now, while the kids are young. And so we moved out to Idaho, where my wife is from. And so that was, almost 10 years ago. I worked for St. Luke's, a big healthcare system, and ran their sports medicine residency program for physical therapists. And then we kept traveling up here to Sun Valley, Idaho, where I live now, to have fun weekends. And then we're like, maybe we can flip this. Maybe we can live in the mountain town and see our family in Boise.
Oh, I love that.
And so we made the switch 6 years ago and never looked back. We love it up here. So I just practice out of a big health club. It's this beautiful health club that has basically everything we would need from, again, from the early post-op clinic to, aquatic therapy to a big strength and conditioning facility. So, I can take care of, grandma after a total knee, or I can take care of an NFL level, quarterback like we did last year. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So I love it up here.
It sounds like a really cool facility.
Amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. It's awesome to hear your clinical background. I know that a big reason why we wanted to bring you on is because of the Ava Cooling Technology. I've listened to a couple of other previous podcasts, and I know that you and I are both big fans of Andrew Huberman and his podcast.
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit more about how you got into Ava Cooling and what made you decide to start up a company really diving into that.
And what is it? Because I'm sure a lot of people don't even Palmer cooling. What's that?
Palmer cooling. What is that? Yeah. Okay. So like this was 2 years ago when we were talking. I would not have known what that term meant.
Same.
So
I didn't when we started talking about it.
So 2 summers ago, I love to be outdoors, and if I could be outdoors for my exercise, I'm going to take that chance. So I'm hiking up Baldy Mountain, which is our ski hill here in the summer, and it's super hot. And I've got I usually wear like a weighted vest and just make it really strenuous, and it's hot. And I'm listening to Huberman's podcast, and he starts talking about how body temperature is related to human performance. So he's like, look, as we exercise, our body temperature goes up, and as body temperature goes up, we start to fatigue, and it brings fatigue on in 2 primary ways. One is at the muscle cell level, so that rise in muscle cell level as it works, and if you throw in like an ambient temperature that's high, that muscle cell's enzymes change a little bit, and that makes that muscle cell less able to continue doing its job. So that's one way body temperature causes fatigue, and then the other way is like there's this negative feedback to our brain. So our hypothalamus in our brain is what is like receiving all the temperature signals, and it kind of like helps us regulate that. So it might cause you to sweat, it might cause you to breathe harder, it might cause you to, or even go into heat preservation mode, like shiver. So temperature is also sending signals to our brain that might like decrease or increase our motivation to want to continue training hard. Okay. So, and with my sports medicine training and everything, we always talked about like body temperature going up and how it relates to catastrophic heat injury. Mm-hmm. So we've heard about players, unfortunately, like passing away during practice who just worked so hard that their body gets to like 104 degrees and they die. And it's obviously a very big concern for, athletic trainers and physios and coaches who work with athletes in hot environments. And so that's basically like, from a temperature going upside, like we always just like we're worried about, okay, let's prevent players from getting to these catastrophic heat levels in their body. But no one was really talking about like, hey, there's a big like zone from 98.6, where is our homeostasis, to 104. There's a big zone there, and that zone of like body temperature slowing going up really decreases performance, right? So it's really driving fatigue in a massive way, a very underappreciated way. So I'm climbing up this mountain, I'm listening to Huberman say this, and I'm like, yeah, like this makes so much sense.
You're like, I'm hot and tired. This is like science in action.
Yeah, it's not even my fault. I'm just heating up. That's why I'm getting tired. It's not because I'm not fit. And so man, I was just like resonating with like, this is like such a no-brainer. Like, why isn't anybody talking about this? And so then it goes on. He's like, my colleague here at Stanford, this is Huberman talking, Dr. Heller, was really looking into this because there seems to be these portals in our body that are covered by glabrous skin. So glabrous skin is like the palm of our hands, the hairless parts of our face, the soles of our feet, and there's no hair follicles on glabrous skin. What's important about those areas is underneath our AVAs, our arterial venous anastomosis. And so this is where your artery and vein connect directly and blood circulates through. So typically that's different because typically there's going to be a capillary bed involved. So your artery puts blood into the capillary, it releases oxygen, takes metabolites back into the vein, and it circulates through. And so by not having that capillary bed, it just creates like a circuit. And in those 3 areas, that circuit has been found to be mostly for temperature regulation. And it's like a system that we use all the time. So if you're hot at night, you stick your foot out from under the blanket to dump heat. If you walk up to a fire and you're cold, you immediately stick your palms out to kind of warm yourself. You hold your warm mug of coffee in the morning. So it's a system that we use, and a lot of animals use all the time to either dump heat or accept heat. And so again, because body temperature rising from exercise causes fatigue, and we have these zones that seem to be pretty efficient and effective at regulating body temperature, Dr. Heller at Stanford was like, well, what if we, between sets of exercise or between big efforts, purposely dump heat out of our palm onto a device? Would that change, the output of the next effort, like either higher watts or more reps or what have you? And also, would it allow a person to continue to train for longer because they're not getting that mental negative feedback to like decrease motivation, right? So he pioneers a few studies that show like these tremendous results. They were, obviously at Stanford, so they had some guys from the 49ers come down, and there's this classic study where they're doing body weight dips. And when they compared like a day without Palmer cooling to a day with Palmer cooling, doing the same workout, they were getting like almost double the amount of output in a workout. And again, that was because there was more reps per set, but then also the athlete chose to keep doing more sets because they weren't getting that like fatigue signal to the brain.
And dips are rough, man.
Yeah,
that's one, like anytime I have a set where it's like to failure, I'm like 8. Okay, we're done.
Yeah. So going back to like this Palmer cooling term, even, I mean, I'm at this point I had been a physical therapist for 13 years. I'd done extra training. I mean, I'm just a nerd about this stuff. So I'm reading about it all the time. And this is literally the first time in my life I've heard anybody say Palmer cooling.
Right.
And really it's the first time anyone's even spoken to me intelligently, or maybe the first time I'm receiving it, about how much temperature relates to fatigue. And it's just like, when you hear it, it's like, of course, like this makes so much sense.
Right.
And then, when I'm like, when I get hot, I stick my foot out from under the blanket. Why do I stick my foot out and not some other part? Or, why did your mom know to put a cold rag on your forehead and she didn't put it, on your knee?
Well, or if you think about just even being out in the sun all day, like laying on the beach and like, you're not doing anything, but if you're just like super hot, I was just realizing, I'm like, I feel like just tired. Or your kid comes in and they're just like, they've been outside and they haven't even run around. They're just like, they just look like, whoa,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so, I guess, just him laying it out like that, like, there's this muscle cellular level issue. And then there's this motivational issue. And I think we can all relate to that. Like doing the same workout when it's 95 and humid out is way different than doing it when it's 60 degrees out and not humid. And so I'm like, I just get to I get done with my hike and I'm like, okay, I gotta try this. It sounds almost too good to be true, because the numbers that they were talking about. So I get home and I get on the internet and I'm looking for something to buy. And on the podcast, they talked about this MIT system. And I get on there and there's a waiting list and it's like $1,500 and that's just for one mitt and it's connected to this like cooler that has a tube that circulates water.
Not even
through.
2 mitts, like, so you'd have to just do like one hand at a time. Just like, sorry, only your right hand, guys. Maybe half the extra output.
Yes. And so I'm like, well, I mean, that's a little outside my price point, especially if I'm just going to try it out. And there's this waiting list. And so I just start going. So I'm like, I got to try this. And so I start, like I'm trying to figure out, okay, like what types of materials will, accept a lot of heat without changing its temperature. And so I go down a rabbit hole, like making my own prototype. And so I find it doesn't take me very long, but I make it and I start doing some like really strict testing with myself in my own workouts. And my first workout that I ever do, I did like a sequential day. So I did a seated shoulder press and I did as many reps as I could to failure just for 7 sets. And I had a 3-minute rest break between sets, which is what Dr. Heller did in his early studies. And so like day 1, I think I get like 128 reps over 7 sets. And as I go along, I get like 26 reps and then 20, just as you would expect. Like each time you're going down, you're fatiguing quite a bit. And so then I repeated that workout the very next day. So I have the same, I think I had a banana and some coffee, which is like typical for me before a workout. That next day I'm like, man, this going to failure 7 times in a row is pretty hard. And shoulders, your shoulder burn is like, pretty
shoulder
intense
burn. Is the most intense burn. I'm sure of it.
And I'm just like,
it's just like so hot.
It's so hot, right? And so I'm kind of like already like it's not super stoked to do this again, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And so I get my Palmer cooling device out, and I get like 18% more reps. So I go from like 120 something to 150. I'm like, man, that's super interesting.
Especially for the very next day.
Yeah. So I would argue like I should do worse. And this, and again, people are gonna say I'm biased, but like at this point, I'm not even thinking like a business guy. I'm just like, I just wanted to try this and be like, hey, is this like valid? Should I be doing this with my athletes? And so I have like a small social media following. And so I post a video and it doesn't get much, like most people don't even realize what I'm doing. Most people haven't heard about it. They don't even notice that I'm holding it. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try this again, but like, I wonder if people will notice more if I like spray paint this thing bright green. So I spray paint it bright green. And my next test, I do a little bit differently, just like a little bit different format. I have a shorter rest break for one, because I was like, you know what, after 3 minutes, I feel pretty recovered anyway, especially with like a shoulder press, like the burn's gone, my heart rate's back to normal. I felt pretty rested in both situations. And so the next time I'm like, well, I'm going to do a shorter rest break. And so I did like a seated row exercise. and I had like a standard amount of reps I was going to try to get to. And then once I got done, I would do like jumping lunges to spike my heart rate. And then just to keep temperature up. And then I would rest for 1 minute. And then, I'd compare cooling and non-cooling. And so with that test, I got like a 28% bump. So huge, like that's, when you talk about strength and conditioning, that's just like, that's pretty insane. Like that doesn't happen. That's not an accident. That's, that's dramatic, and you can feel it. Like, both again, like I think the mental components, like even like the bigger thing that you realize in the moment, like you're just like, yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. And so, I posted that video, and then people were like, hey, like, what's that thing you're holding? I'm like, oh, it's my Palmer cooling device. They're like, oh, where'd you get it? I should buy that. And so then, like, I'd be an entrepreneurial kind of mind. I was like, man, maybe there's something here, cause I heard about it, and Huberman's got a pretty big following, and I just tried to find something that I could use, and I couldn't find anything that fit my needs. I wanted both hands. I wanted to be able to cool it easy. I didn't want it to break the bank. And so, I made a little store real quick. I didn't have any inventory or anything. I just kind of did like a pre-sale button. And in the first 2 nights, I think I had like 6 or 7 sales, no marketing effort or anything. And so I shut it down, and I was like, okay, could I actually like source this? Could I figure this out from like a legit business standpoint? And so, And so, I went down, I kind of figured it all out, did like a pre-sale, and I kind of like, we started shipping, I think on January 1, 2021. And we've just been kind of seeing a steady, increase in, just from a business standpoint, like it's just been getting more and more traction as more and more people hear about it. That's kind of how,
that's
cool.
How
I kind of came to this.
What happened? Like when this started going out, like were you like talking to people and being like, are you trying it? Have you used it with clients now? Like what's your experience been outside of your own personal use?
Yeah. So that was really interesting. So, like all this time when I'm like doing pre-sales and I'm kind of feeling this out, again, I'm a physical therapist and strength coach. So probably half my week is seeing clients, and I don't use it with patients. And I'm not really using this with patients so much. It's usually when they kind of go from that kind of like rehab spectrum to like the conditioning or strength training spectrum. That's what I love. I love like kind of bridging that gap. And I have just like a bunch of clients that I train every week from a strength conditioning side. And so I started like just kind of telling them a little about the physiology, and, they didn't even know the device was mine. And I'd give it to them on one workout, and then the next workout, they're like, hey, where's the cooling thing? And so people were like, kind of like just gravitating towards it, or, sometimes when I'd first work with them, I'd give it to them between sets while we're resting. And one, it's like, I think people rush through workouts a lot. And if we like abide by strength and conditioning principles, most people under rest if they're really trying to optimize that next set. And so for one is like, they were like, okay, like I'm doing something positive here. I'm not just like standing here feeling like, I'm wasting my time with my trainer. I'm actually doing something that's going to improve. So I think there's that component to it. But then, what I started noticing on like sequential workouts is like, if I just left it on the floor, they would get done and immediately go grab and pick it up. And this is not with me, like, telling them to. And so then I shared it with a few, I made a couple other prototypes, and I shared it with a few people around the country who do similar to what I do. And they're like, yeah, people like really like gravitate towards this. And then, even for my own workouts, I just found myself, like just really liking it. And I think there's just a lot of different tools out there that maybe I'm excited about for like a day or two. And then I'm like, it's just like, it's more work than it needs to be. It's actually, I'm not getting much of a benefit. It's kind of a hassle. But this, like, again, I'm like almost 2 years into this now. And, I have it with almost every workout. And again, at Zenergy is our health club. Some of my early adapters who like bought some of my first units, I still go in the gym, and it's 2 years later, and they're still using it at the gym. Wow. They love it. They really think it enhances it. So I think that gave me some like, there's the validity that you get from peer reviewed research. There's the validity you get from like doing strict testing, but then just seeing how people gravitate towards it. It's pretty cool. So that gave me just like, okay, like there's something here that people are appreciating.
Is it better for different types of exercises, rather than the other? Like, is it better for weight training, or is it better for like long form cardio? What types of workouts is it better for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's some misconceptions about this, because, they'll talk about, hey, like double. So I think training volume matters, like how much work. So that could be like, sets times reps times weight is one way to measure training volume. So if you do more sets in a workout, that's going to be higher volume. More reps per set is going to be higher volume, more days per week. So over the chunk of time that you're training, maybe trying to achieve a goal, like you're going to do better if you have a higher amount of training volume. Okay. And that's where like regulating temperature is going to really make its most effect. So that could be, so what we're seeing is if you're trying to get a few more reps in for more sets throughout your workout, like regulating temperature is going to be really important. So it's not going to allow you to put more weight on the bar. Like you have to develop that strength, right? To get more reps in this workout that we're doing. But if I look out down the road in 12 weeks and I'm trying to add 20% to my 1 rep max, well, increased training volume during that time period is going to help me get to that increased weight, right? So in the moment, it's going to allow you to maybe get a couple more reps in the next set as you get into those higher working sets. So that's one way to deploy it, right? So, hey, I want to get a little bit more training volume done at these really difficult weights for me, or these really difficult rep schemes for me, further into my workout. So that's going to be a bigger stimulus to your body, and it's going to cause more adaptation over time. You can also do this with like wattage. So if you're more of like a cardiovascular and endurance type athlete, you're going to probably track watts, which is like how hard you're working at any moment in time, right? So if I'm doing intervals on a rowing ergometer, if I'm doing ski erg intervals, if I'm on a bike, if I'm doing running intervals, I'm going to calculate between how hard you're working and how much you weigh, like what your watts are. So again, I'm going to keep my watts higher for sequential intervals if I cool off in between those intervals.
Okay.
So again, it's not going to make me faster in the moment, but it's going to allow me to stay at a higher level of effort for longer into a workout. And so you'll get a higher training work volume in that workout, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you carry that over to training sessions over time, you can see how like that difference in where you're going to get to starts to increment. Yeah. And so then you look down the road, and this is backed up by research. There's a really cool bench press study showing that people who are doing this, like they start to look different than that other group after the 8-week training period. Wow. They've done much better. Right. And then it's been shown in a rowing ergometer workout too. Like, hey, these people, were able to train harder, and they kind of attributed that to like heart rate reducing faster and like lower blood lactate levels, just the meaning that you're recovering quicker between intervals. So that's the way to think about it. Is okay, like, if I got a goal in mind, or even if like this one workout matters, like, and it's not so much my burst or my 1 rep, but like how long I can sustain a high effort, like cooling your body or dumping body heat is going to be probably as powerful, I would say, as anything you can do. Like if the next 30 seconds matter to you, the next 3 minutes matter to you, like there's probably nothing better you can do for your performance than dump heat. And I don't care how you do it, but if you can find a way to dump heat, and it just so happens that like these areas covered by glabrous skin seem to be as effective as anything to do that.
Awesome. So I have a couple of follow-up questions about volume. One is about junk volume, and 2 is like the increase or the tendency of increased likelihood of injury as you increase volume. So first off, what is your take on junk volume? Like, can you do too much? And does the cooling device or just like thermoregulation, does that help with like making sure that the reps you are getting are better? And then also, does like keeping your heart rate and your internal temperature down, does that help decrease chance of or likelihood of injury?
That's a great question. So nothing replaces like intelligent programming.
Yeah.
Right. So that's probably like square, like phase, like, so if someone, I don't care if you're Palmer cooling or not, if someone tries to increase their training volume too quickly, they have probably a higher propensity for injury, and probably more of like the kind of like repetitive micro trauma that we call it. So you can get like an acute injury where you tear something, or you could have like an injury that kind of like slowly ramps up. So I think that's where we see with a lot of people new to training, where they just get this like running start. They like get super excited, and they train super hard right off the bat, and they don't let their body adapt to the loading, and they might feel great for the first 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden they get all these nagging injuries, and it kind of leads to them falling off again. So that's just all about programming. So going back to I guess I would just preface it with that, right? And so now we have tools to help like aid our training. Okay, so there's a lot of different tools that we can use. So this is like one tool for someone who is trying to intelligently increase their or maybe like break through a training plateau. Maybe they've hit a mark that they haven't been able to break free of. I think they need to like find a way to alter their work volume. And so this can be a way to like kind of break through a training plateau. But even what I'm saying is, I guess I'm butchering this answer, is that, there's actually a research study done by Stacy Sims, who's pretty prominent in kind of the perimenopausal fitness woman world right now. She's got some great books out. She did a study with Stanford, like looking at sedentary obese females. She took 24 people, 12 of them, they all did the same workout program, but there was one difference. When they got on the treadmill, some of them were able to palmar cool during their treadmill intervals, and the other group wasn't. And so they would do some interval training on the treadmill. There was one group would palmar cool, one group wouldn't. And at the end of this training program, the group that did palmar cooling had like better outcomes in everything that they measured, from BMI to heart rate to blood pressure.
Wow.
Just so basically
across the board.
So I guess it's a tool that can be used intelligently in different situations. So it can help the person who's been training for a long time break through a plateau, because I think it's not junk volume. It's actually meaningful volume, and helps you train at meaningful volume for a longer period of time, or maybe it helps you increase that dosage. But then it can also be used because temperature is just it's a human thing. It's a human thing that's causing fatigue. And so whether you're a newbie to exercise and trying to just like figure out how to get that consistency, this can help that person like regulate temperature. And people with like a higher body fat percentage are going to struggle with body temperature, maybe more so than anyone. So it can just help different people at different times with an intelligently designed program achieve greater results. I think I'm skipping some part of your question there, Derek, but
no, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for diving into that.
Well, and I kind of want to do a little clarifying in case there's people listening who don't have a really good understanding of strength training, right? So if I'm just going to break this down a little bit, what I'm hearing you say is we're talking about junk volume. We're talking about, like, let's say it's your fourth set, maybe your fifth set, who knows, and you're just fatigued enough that you're not even really getting full reps. You're probably not doing correct muscle activation. So not only is it not activating the muscle to the capacity in order for it to be a good lift, but there's a chance that you could also be adding injury because you're just too fatigued, right? And I think what you're saying is the palmar cooling can allow you to dump that heat in a way that you're not as fatigued, that you have the ability to go through that set in the way that you should, so it's not quote unquote junk. Is that right? Is that a good breakdown of that? Or is there anything that you would add or clarify?
No, I think that's great because again, part of that fatigue mechanism is the temperature of the muscle cell heating up, right? And so that's going to affect how well you perform those next reps in those sequential sets. So I think you can almost just eliminate the junk from that, assuming that you've given your body appropriate time to recover, and this will kind of like maximize your recovery, and that your muscle is going to be able to perform at a higher level. So I think that's a pretty great way to state that, Natalie.
Awesome.
This is really illuminating to me because, when we first started talking about this, one of my thoughts was, is a device like this potentially going to increase the likelihood of injury because you're like, oh, I've got energy, like I can do this and I'm going to push through. But as we're talking about it and thinking about it, I'm like, well, ultimately, whether you're using the device or they're not, like you said, intelligent training and being aware when you have reached that limit. And to not yes, you have to push yourself in training, but also be smart, right? And that should be present whether you're using the device or you're not, right?
Yes, totally. Again, programming, design, and doing that intelligently is paramount for anybody in any sport, in any situation. And whether you're using something to augment your training or not, like we're not gonna get away with a poorly designed program for too long, and it'll catch up to us eventually. And I don't care if it's an Olympic level athlete or it's someone brand new to a program. We've got to put some thought behind that. And if you're not educated on that, like, find someone who can help you with that.
Well, and I love the application that you told us about the study of the women on treadmills, because I think it might be as easy to listen to you talking about this in the device and be like, oh, this is for weightlifters only.
Or for athletes. Yeah.
For athletes, right? And to hear, because we talk a lot about the simplicity of going on a walk and the impact that can have on your health. And so thinking about treadmill interval training, based on this study group, I'm guessing these women weren't doing like full max capacity sprints for 60 seconds. My guess is that their output was considerably lower than that. And yet still this device had an impact on their results.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And especially this day and age when our society is dealing with, body mass index issues, BMI issues, or and all that, like, finding ways to help people develop healthy habits is so important. And again, just temperature is just one of those things. What you hear is like, we should be like controlling for that, especially for people who are struggling to like create a healthy habit of exercise. If we can take the heat discomfort out of that. And that's what they said. Like, they said in that kind of their summary of that study was like, allowing people who don't tolerate heat very well with exercise to regulate that resulted in better outcomes. And it was as simple as that. Like, just like the discomfort from being too hot, like, stopped people prematurely from doing the amount of exercise that they should do to get the best results over a training period.
Well, that's awesome.
I just had a flashback of being at a CrossFit gym doing one of their like Saturday workouts with the gym doors open and just like the heat pouring in, and I'm just like dead, just absolutely dead. And we're only halfway through the workout, but I was just way too hot. Yeah, what a difference something like that would have made.
Seriously. So we've talked a lot about polymer cooling and the having that as a tool in our toolkit for recovery in between sets during the workout. I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit because obviously you're a physical therapist. You've got a whole bunch of tools that can help with recovery. What is your go-tos for like mid workout? Like, how long do you wait between rest sets? How long do you rest? And then after you get done with your workouts, what do you do to improve and optimize your recovery?
Good questions.
Yeah. So for my own workouts and for my clients, I'm trying to think about the intent of this exercise, so the movement that we're doing, and the intent of what we're trying to develop. So, like a squat can be done really heavily, and which would force you to move slow, because if it's relatively heavy for you, you can't like jump with it, right? But a squat, that would be a strength exercise. Like, how much force can you exert is a measure of strength. Now, how much force you can exert over time, like how quickly you can do that, is power, right? So often I'm like, I think I live in an area where it's all like endurance athletes. So usually they come for me because they know they just can't do endurance stuff all the time. They need to like develop strength and power. So that's probably where 90% of my clients are like, we're just trying to develop strength and power while they go out and do their 10-mile runs. And so when we look at the strength and conditioning research and literature and textbooks, like it's like our rest periods are dependent on like what I'm trying to develop. So if it's a strength movement, we're going to rest at least twice as long as we exercised, and probably upwards of like 3 to 4 times as much time as we exercise. So if that set took them 45 seconds, like, we're going to spend a few minutes like resting before we go back to that lift. So I might throw something else into a circuit that doesn't negatively affect that group of muscles, right? But if we're really trying to get heavy, like on a deadlift or a squat, like, I won't throw anything else into that circuit. We're just we're gonna rest an appropriate amount of time so that our body recovers, and then go back and hit that next set. So I try to be, as cognizant about work to rest ratios as possible. So then if it's power training, we're going to rest even longer. right? So it might take us though, like only 10 seconds to get through like a set of 3 to 5 reps of some power movement. So again, if we took that squat, now I'm jumping with the bar and some weight on it. It's going to be much lighter because it can't be my max amount of weight that I can squat if I'm going to try to jump with it, right? But that gets our heart rate up higher. It's a bigger effort. There's actually more risk for injury there. So we're gonna rest even longer. So now you're looking at like 5-6 times this amount of rest as work.
Okay.
So I think those are really important things to like keep in mind as we're training, because we don't want everything to just turn into boot camp style where we're just like breathing super hard and we're doing like junk reps, I would call it. And we're just always and we're always just developing like, strength endurance basically at that point. Like if we just like constantly move and we're just doing as many reps as we can and we go from one workout, one exercise to the next, like literally you're probably only ever developing strength endurance. And that's good if that's what your intent is. But if you're like, hey, I want to be like super powerful and become a better sprinter, well, like strength endurance probably isn't where you want to spend a lot of your time. Right. And so like thinking about like the intent of the movement you're doing, like, cause some movements, like if you're doing a kettlebell, if you're doing dumbbell snatch, like you can't, like you don't do that slow. Like you don't do that as heavy as possible.
Right.
Like you do it light enough that you can move it fast and heavy enough that that is challenging. Right. So there's certain exercises that can be one or the other. And certain exercises that can really only be one of those things. And so that's where those like, those Olympic lifting variations are almost always power, like your clean and jerk. You never do that stuff slow. So that kind of changes the way, we program our resting. It's just like, what's the intent of what I'm trying to develop here in this person? But then there are, then as you get into like the strength endurance work, right? So then sometimes those work rest ratios flip. Right. So now I might be trying to like do max amount of push-ups for 1 minute and then only have a 30-second break and then do that again. So it just kind of depends, like, am I trying to work on what end of the spectrum am I trying to work on is going to dictate like how much rest I have between those efforts. And that's where you can see like with like Tabata training and a lot of stuff that helps like develop VO2 max, you might actually work a little bit longer than you rest, so that you get to that threshold. Where your body can't clear the lactate and all that. So anyway, so that's how I program, like as far as like recovery between sets. Yeah, and again, so now exactly right. And so then if I throw in Palmer cooling during that, like I might be able to get a few more sets at that higher level. Again, depending on the day, depending on the effort level.
Can you get away with shorter rest times with Palmer cooling?
You could, yeah. So I think with like the strength endurance, there's so many variables, right? So yes, you could, right? Because it does, your heart rate decreases faster, right? And your temperature is going to go down quicker, so you'll probably be able to perform at a higher level with a shorter rest break than if you didn't, right? But I would still say like, we probably typically I don't necessarily consider Palmer cooling when I'm considering how long my rest break is. I'm just using that to augment that rest break. So I still kind of go by strength conditioning principles, and then just use that to know that, hey, that's going to be a better recovery interval than if we weren't doing this. And so that's just going to make my next set stay at a higher level. Yeah, great question.
The reason I ask is because I know, different people have varying amount of times that they can spend in the gym, right? Some people can dedicate a full 2 hours to get stuff knocked out.
Yes.
And, obviously when you're working out for that long, you want to ensure that you're recovering as long as you need to. But a lot of people only have like 60 minutes to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so if they can increase their volume, you don't want to decrease your rest period to where you're then getting into junk volume. But if you can keep your rest period short and use the Palmer cooling to basically enhance that next set, then that could be a really powerful tool for a lot of people.
Yeah, with the shorter workouts for sure.
Yeah, totally. I'm a big like an hour and under. Like my training sessions with people are an hour under. That includes a dynamic warm up and general warm up, and then we're into our lifts. And so I'm not a big proponent of like super long workouts. I guess there's obviously a time and place, but for me, it's always like, unless I have like a specific athlete I'm working with who's training for a specific sport, if it's just kind of general conditioning, like let's make this realistic. Let's make this like sustainable. Like obviously there's times in our life when we might have room for 2.5 hours, but like most adults, honestly, like probably don't. And we like, if we want to continue this, like, I could like eat a super strict, way stricter than I do. I could like, try to like be so nerdy about my sleep that it affects my life, but like, I just want to be, I want to be able to live life, enjoy food, enjoy, my family but still also stay at a high level of fitness. And so like, if I get 45 minutes to an hour at a gym, or outside, 4 or 5 days a week, like that's a sustainable level for me. And so how can I optimize those chunks of time to make it like, exactly right. Yeah.
That's so true and such a good point, because I think it keeps a lot of people from being in a regular fitness routine. The idea of like, and I've even been through these periods in my life where it's like, how do I even have time? And it feels like, well, if I can't do it 6 days a week, then why should I even bother kind of thing, because there's just so much going on. And I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. I work a full-time job. I help record a podcast. Like, where's the time, But you just reminded me, it's like, there's just so much impact that can happen in a short amount of time.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah, totally. Yep.
Okay. So that's your like rest time, whatever.
Yes.
So now tell us, what's your favorite ways of recovery after the workout?
Yeah. So I'm going to be a little bit of an outlier here in that after my workout, I'm way more concerned with preparation for the next workout. So I put way more stock into, proper, what am I trying to say? Proper, warm up and preparation for my next workout than I am in my recovery after a workout.
Okay.
And, so, there's times when I will use sauna or cold plunges, but honestly, like for me personally, my life doesn't have time for a lot of like post-workout recovery stuff. Right. And so I might, if I really tax a certain body part, I might like think of like doing some mobility drills throughout the day after that. But I just know that I'm always going to go through a great warm up before my next workout, that I'm going to get those joints, those muscles, that area in the best possible position and feeling as good as possible in my warm up leading up to my big efforts. And I just worry less and less about like foam rolling, trigger point stuff, cold plunges, all that stuff. I just don't, honestly, and that's just my bias. I just don't have a lot of time for that. And I know also if I do all that stuff the next day, I still need to do an awesome warm up. I still need to prepare my body like crazy, especially I'm 44 now. Like it just takes me a little bit longer to get ready. It doesn't matter how good I treated myself last night at 8 p.m. or 6 p.m. I've got to like wake up, and if it's my early workout, I got to go through the same warm up. If it's later in day workout, I might be a little bit fresher anyway. So that's where I put all my my eggs in my basket is into that pre stuff.
So with that being said, what is the difference between a bad warm up and a really awesome warm up?
I think a really awesome warm up starts with, and I'm the polymer cooling guy, but I actually want to get my body a little bit warm, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do like a general warm up of just some sustained like aerobic exercise. And it's not long. I might do like 5 to 8 minutes of either like a fast walk. I might do a little jog. I might get on a ski erg. I like to row. I'm just going to do something that gets my heart rate up a little bit, warms my body up a little bit, not to a fatiguing level, and allows me to feel good then I start to go through like a bunch of big movement patterns. So I'm going to typically do like 10 to 20 squats. I'm going to lunge in like every different direction that I can lunge. I'm going to like hollow out my core as I hang from a bar to stretch my shoulders and fire up my core. I'm going to do some planking. I'm going to do some pressing and pulling. Most of that just all like body weight type stuff. And I'm going to like emphasize, depending on what I have programmed for my lift. I like to lift a lot. It's just going to be heavy focused into that pattern that I'm about to train aggressively. So if it's a squat day, I'm really spending time at the bottom of my squat, warming up my hips, thinking about my spine position. If it's a front squat, I might like work on a little bit more shoulder mobility than normal. So to me, that's the optimum. It's get the body temperature up a little bit so you're kind of pliable, and then like really focus on warming up the movement patterns that you're going to train aggressively. And then, and for me, like where I'm at in my life, like I don't do a whole lot of variety at the gym now. I might have 3 exercises that I'm working through, and I'm probably going to do those like 9 to 10 sets. I just know the first couple sets are going to be just kind of, again, just like building up to like my heavier working loads. And then I'm going to then I want to like kind of get a lot of training volume at those working loads. So that's kind of how the sequence of my program goes. And again, I just know I have to do that preparation work no matter how good I did on the post workout recovery.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What about stretching after a workout? Are you a big stretcher? Are you a proponent of stretching? Because I know people that are like, oh, I never stretch. And I do like at least a 5 to 10 minute yoga cool down stretching after every lift. So how important is that? Or is it important?
Yeah, I think that's a really debatable topic, right? So most of the research says like stretching probably doesn't improve performance or decrease injury. So I always say, but I also know as someone, who's on the tighter side of the spectrum, like if I don't stretch and I don't work on my mobility, like I feel worse and I don't move as well, and that can lead to injury. So as a physical therapist, I'm always like, well, where are they? Like our bodies all kind of gravitate towards certain places that are restricted and certain places aren't. Like I just always have great quad mobility, right? It's not that I work on it a bunch and my hip flexors don't get super tight, but if you looked at my hamstrings, you'd be like, holy cow, dude, like what is your problem? Like, don't you ever work on this? I'm like, yeah, I work on it every freaking day. And so that's where like after a workout, I think if I'm going to give like professional advice, I'm like, there's probably specific areas that your body tends to hold tension in. And that's where you should spend a little bit of extra time on your accessory mobility or stretching. And that can be dynamic stretching. It can be static stretching. We can argue about those. I tend to, if I do static stretching, it tends to be towards at the end of my program where I just might be too tired to do more dynamic stuff. So I might I might put my foot up on the wall and do some static hamstring stretching. And we can debate that, but I think, having it tailored to like what you need is probably more important. And then also realizing that most people stretch what they don't need. Like they tend I get my people who go to yoga all the time who are good at yoga and they're good at it because they already have like super flexible hamstrings and they can do all the bending forward exercises super easy. And then like, oh, my hamstrings are so tight. Like I need to work on my hamstrings after I lift. Right. I'm like, have you seen your like pelvic tilt? Like all your tension's on the front side. Like stop stretching your hamstrings, stretch your hip flexors, stretch your quads. But we all gravitate towards like working the things that we are good at.
Yeah, totally.
So, a question for that. I know that a lot of people will stretch areas of their body that are sore. So I kind of wanted to talk about soreness generally, the infamous DOMS that we all hate.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit more about like good strategies for overcoming soreness, and is stretching a good strategy for that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, like how we are still learning so much about like the adaptations that happen to us during strength training. There's a Instagram guy that I follow. His name's Chris Beardsley. He's got strength and conditioning research, I think is like his handle. And it's fascinating because he just goes down these rabbit holes on the very specific thing that you asked. And he'll write like I go post it on Instagram and it's probably 1,000 words and like one picture and you're like reading it and at the end he's like, and so we're still not sure what DOMS is at the end, right?
And why it's worse on the second day than the first day. Yeah,
right.
And only, but for some exercises and not for others, right? And so I think I guess in the practical, like, because again, I try to read this stuff and stay up to date on it. Like, there seems to be some type of cellular destruction that's causing DOMS, and some of that is probably good because that probably leads to hypertrophy, like the recovery from that. And some exercises, maybe it's like the eccentric loading seems to cause more of that. So I think that can be a good thing so long as it's not so severe that it's like preventing you from living the life that or performing the way you want to perform or living or doing activities that you would normally do. Like I actually did a pretty stupid workout on Saturday. And I'm like 2 days into my, this is day 2 of DOMS. And I'm like, I really don't even want to train today. So that to me, that's just like, that's again, I should know better, but that's an inappropriate amount of volume that I did. And I'm struggling to get through that.
Okay, wait, you both said DOMS twice. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what you mean when you're saying DOMS.
So
I'm
DOMS
you're good.
Delayed
Say that
onset
again.
muscle soreness. Delayed onset muscle soreness. So
Got
this
it.
is that,
Something.
like when you, so if I don't back squat for a while and I do back squats, like 2 days later, I'm going to have the worst DOMs of my life because there's a big eccentric load. And so,
I've experienced
so it
that
seems
with too long a break from being in the gym. And then it's like,
right?
I'm literally like, why is walking down the stairs harder than walking up the stairs? Like, how is this?
Right?
Gravity's on my side.
Yeah. And so that down, so not only does DOMs seem to be increased with eccentric loading or lengthening phase loads. But then when you're experiencing DOMs, like you're having that muscle soreness, like those lengthening loads also like make you feel it more. So like sitting down onto the toilet seems to be worse, right? After then getting up from it, right? So I think, what I tend to tell people is like, one, like remember like why you're having DOMs. Like, it's either been too long since you hit that exercise. So maybe maybe that needs to be put into your program more often. And then like the loading you did was inappropriate. So maybe there's like too much weight, too many reps, too many sets, whatever. Right. So all that stuff can lead to delayed onset muscle soreness. And then, so I think just like movement is the key. So,
I agree.
Whether it's stretching or cycling or even just walking. But I'll tend to like, obviously it was the squats that got me too sore. So I might like do a few more like body weight squats in my next warm up to just kind of like move through that range of motion where probably you're going to feel that DOMs the most, and just try to get that muscle tissue moving. Good question. So I guess if we go back to the research, I don't know that there's a standardized way to like reduce DOMs quicker than other ways. But I think movement and like kind of, flushing fluids and getting all that tissue to kind of slide and glide the way it's supposed to is probably a good idea generally.
Yeah. I found that like, if I'm feeling that way the second day, if I wait another day, it doesn't really help. Like just get back, like go do something, right? Because it's just sitting still. So. It's like, I feel like I'm just going to atrophy. It's just like everything's like turning into cement slowly, as it sets there. So just like you said, just going for a walk or something. I hadn't even considered doing the same exercise because there's been times that feels like a terrible idea. Yeah. But just moving is usually more so than stretching. Although I do have to say I'm a big fan of cold therapy. That is, that's a big favorite for me.
Yeah. And I'm not like, I think people should do that if it fits into their schedule. Just like from where I'm at, and like from like a logistic standpoint, I guess if I had a cold plunge at my house, I'd probably do that more often. But like, again, so I think there's a lot of ways to like, hack our bodies and like optimize things. But again, it's gotta be realistic for you to be meaningful and something that's like sustainable.
Right. And taking time to like, what are you saying? Like 10 minutes for a warm up is even good. Does it need to be longer when we're going to the gym and warming up?
10 minutes I think is a great, ballpark, again, there's days where, at 44, like I got DOMs going on, like it's probably going to be a 15-minute warm up today. I might sacrifice a few sets to like get in a few more warm up reps, or sustained holds. And, I might just have to like get my hips feeling better than they do today. And so that might, increase my, amount of prep work that I do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, going into now just like post workout recovery, what role do like sleep and nutrition play? How do you make sure that those are optimized so that way when you do make it to the next workout, you're ready to go?
Yeah. I mean, sleep and nutrition are probably like the bedrock of everything, right? Yeah. I mean, I guess you could probably talk to different people, like which one is the bottom of your triangle. But so yeah, again, so I'm like, again, and I think people vary so much, and it's why like giving like just blanket, like here's how you do it, statements is dangerous, because like some people might thrive at like 6.5, 7 hours of sleep. Some people might need 8.5, 9 hours of sleep. The further you get from, I guess, if we say 8 hours maybe is optimal, the further your way you get like going longer or shorter than that, like from that kind of like maybe like target line, like I think there's probably less argument for those variables, like sleeping 13 hours or sleeping 4 hours, like probably neither one of those are great. Right. For my myself, I seem to do really well from like anywhere from 7 to 8.5 hours of sleep. If I sleep longer than that, like I'm just not there. I'm like in a fog. Something I was probably not doing what I was supposed to the night before, from a alcoholic beverage standpoint or something, like having too much fun with friends. And so that's a whole nother topic. But, and then if like, if you got like, you can't turn your brain off at night and you sleeping like horrible, and, I think, you're not going to perform very well either. So I think, trying to be consistent. I'm a big believer in like, even on the weekends, like I tend to get up around 6 o'clock every morning for work, just to get my day going before the kids are up. And so like, I don't really change that a lot on weekends. I try to stay fairly consistent within a half hour, like, cause I just know like, I don't want to just like send these like mixed signals to my body and get myself out of a rhythm. And if I think you can stay on a better rhythm, like you're probably just going to have like more consistency throughout your week and just like have less like these big ups and downs that I think a lot of people struggle with. Yeah. So I think, timing of waking up, the amount of time you sleep, and timing of going to bed can, I think all that stuff should not have like huge variations in it if you're trying to be optimal.
I heard something recently,
yeah, go ahead.
On the Huberman Lab podcast just very recently, basically saying that if you push back the time that you go to sleep, even by like 30 minutes or like an hour later, because we release growth hormone, we have a big surge of growth hormone when we first go to sleep, which is, I'm sure, very important for recovery. It's good for lean muscle mass. It's good for reducing body fat, all those kind of things. But when you push it back, the time you go to bed an hour, that window of massive growth hormone release basically doesn't happen, or it's like blunted seriously. And so something that normally helps you recover and grow, all of a sudden is gone. And so, and it doesn't really get replaced later in sleep, which I found very, very interesting.
Super interesting. Yeah. I mean, trying to fall asleep is like, again, a big, I guess that just makes sense. Like if we just like throw these like crazy new stimuli at our body, that kind of mess up our natural rhythms, that's just going to create havoc. Like, even if it seems like that's a good idea, but like, I think, if we do these like smaller incremental things, it's probably going to, maybe give us more of the benefit and keep our body more on its natural pattern.
Definitely.
Derek and I were talking about, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. I think you're diving right into it. So.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about, we're actually like thinking about Palmer cooling or glabrous skin cooling in terms of sleep performance. So like actually being a fall asleep aid. And so some of the NCAA teams and professional teams that I've been working with on this are actually as interested in like how this might help players sleep as it is in like affecting their workouts. Right. So if we think of, if you talk to Matt Walker, some of these sleep experts are going to say probably the optimal time to work out or train is going to be earlier in the day, because it takes a long time for our body temperature to kind of down regulate after a workout, right? And so if if we work out earlier in the day, we're going to allow our body to kind of like naturally cool over the course of that day. And then that we know that body temperature is like very, related to like how well we fall asleep. So if we think about any like collegiate athlete or professional athlete, especially in certain sports that are that fans are involved in, like a lot of times those games are scheduled for evenings so that people can go watch, right? And that's probably the worst time to like, one, skyrocket your body temperature because you're exerting yourself, but then also all the hormonal changes of just being aroused from the game and the competition and all that. And so like you're basically like spiking temperature and hormones at the worst time of day, because then you also want those players to go home and go to sleep somehow.
Right.
And so, So, there's some different, talks about whether there should be a warm shower or a cold shower. But what we're finding, and I've even found this personally when I joined a men's soccer league 2 years ago, it's like, man, I had these like 7 p.m. starts. We get done around 9, and there was no way I was falling asleep before like 2 a.m. on those nights, because I hadn't competed that night in a long time. And then, just thinking about the physiology of like the AVAs and like down regulating our body temperature. So using our polymer cooling device, like helped me fall asleep like way easier.
Wow.
And so I started like, pitching that to some of these like athletic trainers that I was working with at universities. And they had like their one basketball team the first basketball team to implement that, they had guys like checking the device out after a game, going home with it and using it as like a healthier way to fall asleep as opposed to some other, whether it's medication or alcohol or weed or whatever it is, like all these things that probably are not ideal.
Right.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about
so
that because I know there are some times where I like literally feel the most relaxed if I take a cold shower like right before I get in bed. Especially in the summer when it's hotter and the AC is struggling to keep up because, I like to sleep with blankets. It's comforting, but then if it's really hot, you just really can't and the fan's not enough. Wow, it makes such a difference.
A huge difference.
In how quickly I fall asleep and how relaxed I feel.
I know temperature plays a huge role when you sleep. I wanted to share a really brief story. When I was a kid, I would always get way too hot sleeping. And so I actually took my pillow during the day and I would put it in the chest freezer.
That's awesome.
That's actually a really great idea.
And then I'd take it out. My pillow is like ice cold and I slept great. After that point, I always slept great.
Oh, that's so
but
funny.
so in general, I know that like a lot of experts recommend trying to keep the temperature of your house down as cool as possible, like 68, 69, that kind of temperature range while you're sleeping. But yeah, it totally makes sense why, like, if you had that Palmer cooling while you're going to sleep, it's just going to help your body regulate even more and even better. So that's really, really cool.
Our normal way to get temperature is like an hours long process, right? And so even just like a couple of minutes of Palmer cooling is probably not good. So like our like kind of post game or post practice protocol is like, we know these guys are going to come home, guys and gals, they're going to come home. They're going to be like checking emails or playing video games and probably eating. So their hands are busy. And so we tell them to like take their shoes and socks off and start rolling like their feet, like that, those soles of the feet on the Palmer cooling device to start like dumping heat, right? And then as they finish up using their hands for whatever they have to do, and as they get into bed, it's like, okay, let's try to get like 5 or 10 more minutes of like holding that device while you go to bed. And we're just hearing like great news. And again, I think this whole Palmer cooling, and just glabrous skin cooling in general just is so understudied right now, which I think that's changing because, obviously like Huberman's talking about it, and that's going to drive a lot of interest across the world. But there's just so much we need to like learn about the parameters and how long we should, what are the best, not only just temperature, but what are the optimal temperatures? What are the optimal times to do it? Like how to use it when it's for sleep. I've been talking to a psychologist who works in the MBA. He's actually looking at, he's like, man, I think I can apply this for some of my anxiety patients in my practice, because he'll use the mammalian dive reflex for some of his people who really struggle, which is like where you put your face into cool water and that causes a nervous system, adaptation. He's like, I actually think it might actually just be the AVAs that we're just getting cool. And that's like causing this like down regulation. So there's just like so much that we need to like learn about temperature. I don't know where I was going with that, but like,
that's just fine. Are there any like misconceptions when it comes to like thermoregulation? And if there are, can you kind of go into those a little bit?
Yeah, I think one that we hear a lot is like, well, can I just grab a bag of ice or put my hands in snow or whatever? And I think there is some nuance to like, at least from a Palmer cooling standpoint, like if we're trying to keep blood circulating through our palm and accelerate the dumping of heat, like we can't grab something that's going to cause our nervous system to vasoconstrict. Right. So if it's freezing cold, like your nervous system is probably going to vasoconstrict, and that might thwart the cycling of blood through that area. So what Dr. Heller at Stanford was talking about, he was saying like 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit is probably the optimal temperature gradient that doesn't cause nerve restriction. I'm finding like for me anyway, and most of the people I'm working with, 45 degrees to 60 degrees seems to be like maybe a little bit more generous sweet spot. And I think that's probably going to be plus or minus a few degrees depending on the person on either range of that. So that's one thing is like, I think just sticking your hands on ice is there might be some like mental benefit to that, but I think from an actual cycling water, like cool blood through your system, that might be too cold and might be causing your nervous system to go into like a retraction motor. And then even, Dr. Heller talks, and again, this needs to be studied more, but he was, like it's really common for people to put cold stuff around their neck. Right. We see this in boxing and a lot of sports like that. And what he's postulating is like, our arteries and veins are kind of going up to our brain from that area. And so if we like are telling the blood in our neck that's going directly to our hypothalamus that is cold out, is our body going to go actually into like maybe like a heat preservation mode? Like maybe that's like sending the wrong signal to the thermostat, right?
Right.
Even though it might feel good, but it might be actually telling your body the wrong thing, and so that might like actually like damper your like normal temperature dispersing like mechanisms. So he's saying like maybe again we need to study this stuff more, but maybe we need to be more nuanced to our approach about how we deploy like heat dumping in these certain situations where we're still trying to like compete. Like I think getting into a cold plunge is a very different way of thinking about like deliberate cold than polymer cooling.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is all very fascinating to me because it's just like we said in the beginning, things that I've just never really heard about. It's like kind of feels like pretty cutting edge. So I'm really excited for people to learn about this. And, because it's clear that there's already a lot of benefit, even with as much as like you're saying, there's still more research to be done and more to be discovered and what's actually optimal. But to know like you can still use it just in a simple way and see benefits, not just in exercise, but in sleep as well. Like we already know that. I'm excited to see what more comes out of the research.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I tell people, it's like, again, it's like, we're already doing it, right? You're already sticking your foot out from under the blanket to dump heat. And so I tell people like, even, forget about the device. Like if you're a football player and you're struggling and your helmet is covering your forehead, like you're just like, you got this plastic plastered against your foam plastic, right? Like just lift your helmet up, expose your forehead. If you got gloves on and you're like dying of heat, like take your gloves off and let the air, assuming it's not 100 degrees out. But like, there's ways to like think about this, so if you're a coach, athletic trainer, and you see people struggling, I think there's ways to like think about using this system more intelligently, whether you have a device or not. Like I think you can optimize it, but then we can also just think about like, hey, how do we use what we got already?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Definitely. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation.
I know.
Moving forward, well, actually, one last question. Do you have any one last piece of advice for our listeners of like whether they want to improve their athletic performance or they want to improve their recovery? Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I mean, I just think finding like someone, again, I guess it depends on like your amount of education. Like, so, if you're you're at point A and you're trying to get to point B, or maybe you're just trying to improve like your longevity or just like optimize where you're at. I think most of us like would like to like be healthy, be able to kind of like jump into any activity with our kids. I think finding someone who can who can evaluate you, who can understand where you are and where you're trying to get to and create like a sustainable way to get there. So I think I just like tell people like, we think we know it all, like, but like there's people who are like highly trained at this stuff. And it doesn't have to be like, recreate, like it doesn't have to be some elaborate thing, but like coming up with like a game plan so that like your great intentions at the start don't fall off because you did go too hard right off the bat and you got injured. Like I think, especially when you take on a professional or get some help, like, think of it and like, I got to do this for 6 weeks and learn everything I can, and learn everything at once. Like this, like there's just like, think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. And like how can you develop something that really works for your life, and your goals and the reality of your situation, and then try to create like a plan and follow that plan for a while. And then if you do that for a while, then you can start like making some nuanced changes to it. But I think finding some help for some advice that maybe isn't just like, like someone's got an awesome body on Instagram that looks like they know what they're doing, so I'm going to follow what they did. And I just don't think and I think that's where we're at, honestly. Like, I know, like, probably just a lot of the smartest people I know in the physical therapy and fitness realm have zero social media presence, and that's probably where people could learn the most from. So I don't know, we can use those people on social media for inspiration, and maybe goal setting to some extent, but it's like finding someone who can see where you're at, take into account what you've been through, what your body's been through, how much time you have, and then create something that's just well developed for you. I think that's really a key to making this thing realistic and sustainable, and not just a yo-yo of going up and down and getting frustrated, with some periods of feeling really good. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, Kyle, where can people find you and find your device? Are you still selling the device? Or is there a wait list? Tell us about this.
No, there's no wait list. We ship within a couple of days usually.
Awesome.
So it's just www.avacooling.com. So it's really AVA as in arterial venous anastomosis, but we all say Ava. So avacooling.com is where you can find more about my product and how to buy it. And then, if you're ever in Idaho, I live in the Sun Valley and I practice out of Zenergy Health Club and Spa. And, so that's where you can find me for my professional stuff. But yeah, that's the website. And then just on social media, on Instagram, we're usually Ava Cooling Technology is the handle for pretty much everything, cool. Whether it's YouTube or TikTok or Instagram and all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been a really fun conversation, I think, for really both awesome. Derek and I. Yeah. And I'm really excited for our listeners to hear this. And, we're always trying to find ways to kind of open up the conversation and the thought process of how to live better, fuller, longer, healthier lives. And this is just a really wonderful addition to that. So thank you. And congratulations, man. What a cool thing that you did. I think it's just awesome that you heard an idea, you looked it up, you realized there was an opportunity in the market, and you're getting it out there. That's awesome. So congrats to you.
Well, I appreciate the invite. It's been awesome talking to you guys. I really am thankful to be able to talk to you guys.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, Kyle.